15th August 2022. People across India celebrated 75 years of independence from the British rule. But very often we tend to forget the hostile and difficult path that our earlier generations had to cross before stepping into today's land of prosperity and fortune. Through the illustrations of Kallol Ray, who is a visual storyteller, I shall tell you the story of that incredible journey of our countrymen during the last 165 years, which was full of torment, injustice, struggle, determination, and achievement. In a short time frame, I shall try to touch upon a few selected events which I personally feel are the most relevant and significant for the formation of our new India. Though our story begins 165 years ago, in 1857, the preface was written in the year 1757, when the East India Company permanently established their rule in India by winning the Battle of Plassey. In the next 100 years, Indians were exploited, tortured, looted, and killed mercilessly by the Britishers. During this period, some scattered and localized revolts like Santal Rebellion, Anglo-Khasi War, and many such others happened. 1857. Sepoy Mutiny is considered to be the first mass movement against the British rule. The discontentment and anger had accumulated for years. The issue of new imported cartridges for Enfield rifle had become the flashpoint. The revolt broke out first in the Barakpur military garrison led by Mangal Pandey, which spread like a forest fire across the nook and corner of the country. 1875. Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay wrote his famous novel Anandamot and the poem Vande Mataram. In no time, Vande Mataram became the main mantra and inspiration for the Indian freedom movement. 1885. Indian National Congress was established in Mumbai. 1886. Rabindranath Tagore sang Vande Mataram for the first time in the Indian National Congress session. 1905. Partition of Bengal presidency was made on religious lines under the British divide and rule policy. Led by Surendranath Banerjee, a countrywide protest, Bongo Bongo Andolon and Swadeshi movement were started. On the day of the partition, under protest, people of Bengal did not cook food in their homes. Hindus, Muslims celebrated Raksha Bandhan as a symbol of brotherhood and unity. The partition of Bengal strengthened the national movement across the country. Many secret and underground organizations were formed to initiate an armed revolution. In 1906, Jugantar Party was formed, followed by Anushilan Samiti. 1908. Khudiram Bose and Prafulla Chaki made a failed attempt to kill the district magistrate of Muzaffarpur. Khudiram Bose was later captured by police. After a short trial, he was hanged to death only at the age of 18. The bravery and sacrifice of Khudiram Bose inspired the entire nation. 1914. The First World War began. It changed the political scenario of the entire world as well as India. Around 13 lakh young Indians were pushed to the forefront of Europe's deadly battleground without proper protection or support. 1919, 13th April. At Jallianwala Bagh of Amritsar, a British officer ordered police forces to open fire on a peaceful gathering of 15,000 men, women, and children. Thousands of people died on the spot, and many more were injured by that indiscriminate and merciless firing. The entire country protested the incident with anger and frustration. Under protest, Rabindranath Tagore returned the knighthood to the British Supremo. 1920. The father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, called the nationwide non-cooperation movement, keeping the Khadi movement at the forefront, boycotting foreign goods, foreign dresses, and foreign educational institutions, gained tremendous momentum in the country. In 1922, on the unfortunate incident of burning 22 policemen alive inside a police station at Chauri Chaura in Uttar Pradesh by an angry mob, Gandhiji pulled out the nationwide movement. In 1928, Bhagat Singh planned to kill the police chief who was responsible for the death of Lala Lajpat Rai. Instead, he killed John Saunders, a junior officer. Again, in 1929, he and Batukeshwar Dutt lobbed a bomb at the Central Legislative Assembly and then surrendered. He was hanged at the age of 23 for the murder of John Saunders. 1930. On 18th April, under the leadership of a school teacher, Surya Sen, popularly called as Master Da, a large group of young men and women captured the British armories in Chittagong. They had isolated the city from the rest of the world by uprooting railway tracks, telegraph and telephone lines and declared freedom of Chittagong. But after a couple of days, a large British force arrived and most of the freedom fighters were killed in the encounter. They managed to arrest Master Da, and after a brutal torture, he was hanged to death. 1930. Gandhiji called for nationwide Salt Satyagraha, a mass civil disobedience against the salt tax imposed by the British government. On 12th March 1930, he led a large procession from Sabarmati Ashram to Dandi, a coastal village in Gujarat, to break the unacceptable salt law. It gave a large momentum to India's freedom movement. 1939. The Second World War broke out in Europe. As a major supplier of resources for the British force, India had been indirectly involved in the war. Millions of Indians were sent to the forefront of the battlefield without proper arms and protection. Keeping the countrymen hungry and starved, food grains were being preserved and exported to the Allied forces in Europe. This caused the infamous Bengal famine, in which more than 4 million people died. 1942. Indian National Army, or Azad Hind Fauj, was formed in Singapore by Raj Bihari Bose. Later, he handed over the command to Subhash Chandra Bose. Netaji had completely revived the force by accumulating lakhs of the Indian prisoners of war captured by Japan during the Second World War. Irrespective of caste and religion, every fighter of INA saw a single dream: getting total freedom of the country from the British Raj. 1942. Gandhiji called the nationwide Quit India movement and asked countrymen to completely non-cooperate the foreign rulers. People across the country, irrespective of caste, gender and religion, joined the mass movement. Inspired by the call of Gandhiji, do or die, millions of Indians left government jobs, schools and colleges in support of the movement. 1944. Azad Hind Fauj gave a tough fight to the British-led Allied force and entered almost 250 kilometers inside the Indian territory. The Indian national flag was hoisted in a small town called Mairang in Manipur. But unfortunately, after surrender of the Japanese army to the Allied force, all the supply chains for food and resources to the INA were stopped and they were forced to surrender. They were imprisoned and brought to the Red Fort for the court-martial. 1946. The last nail to the coffin of the British rule in India was driven by the Royal Indian Navy mutiny. The initial flashpoint was at Bombay port. Soon the revolt spread and found support throughout British India from Karachi to Calcutta, and ultimately came to involve over 20,000 naval infantry in 78 warships and at 20 naval establishments across the country. Even common civilians, police personnel, and soldiers joined the revolt against the British rule. 15th August 1947. After 200 years of the British rule, the Union Jack was put down, and in that place, the Indian national flag was hoisted at the top of the Red Fort. A new nation was born. 1947. India became independent. But the British had mercilessly divided the country under religious lines. Overnight, more than 20 million innocent people across the border were forcefully uprooted from their own land. Bengal and Punjab had mostly suffered. People often describe it as one of the biggest mass exodus and refugee crises in the history of mankind. 1948, 30th January, Gandhiji was assassinated. The whole country was shocked and plunged into deep sorrow. 1949. The outline of the Indian Constitution was formed, and in the next year, on 26 January 1950, it was officially made effective. The Constitution declares India as a sovereign, socialist, secular, and democratic republic. 1951. The first general election established a strong and robust foundation of democracy for the country. 1967. M.S. Swaminathan led the country for the Green Revolution. Through scientific research and development, our agricultural scientists were able to produce high-yield crops, and within a few years, the country became a food surplus nation from a very poor and food deficit country. 1970. Dr. Verghese Kurian, who is often called the milkman of India, ran the biggest dairy development program in the country. Under this scheme, more than 700 big cities, small towns, and villages came under the network of milk production and distribution. The country stepped towards self-sufficiency. 1974. First time Indian scientists successfully tested a nuclear bomb at Pokhran of Rajasthan. It was not only a giant leap for India's research and development sector, but also an important step towards self-reliance and defense. 1975. Indian scientists added another feather to their cap. Aryabhat, an indigenously developed satellite, was first time placed in the Earth's orbit. It marked the start of a new journey for ISRO. 1983. Under the captaincy of Kapil Dev, Team India first time won the Cricket World Cup. At that time, that win was a tremendous inspiration to the country's young generation. 1984, 3rd April was another historic day for India. Wing Commander Rakesh Sharma was the first and the only Indian to step into outer space. 1991. Under the guidance of Dr. Manmohan Singh, India opened its economy to the world, and the country started its journey from a small state-controlled economy to an economic superpower. 1999. Pakistan, the arch-rival neighbor, had already attacked India 3 times, in 1947, in 1965, and in 1971. But during the 1999 Kargil War, the decisive victory over Pakistan, in one of the most hostile and highest terrains on earth, established India's military might and supremacy. Countrymen shall remember the bravery and sacrifice of their heroes on that battlefield for decades to come. 2008, Chandrayaan-1, India for the first time sent a satellite to the moon with their indigenously developed rocket PSLV. 2008, another positive achievement. Avinav Bindra was the first Indian to win Olympic gold in an individual event. 2013, ISRO scientists sent a satellite to Mars with the help of an indigenous PSLV rocket. India became the fourth country after the US, Russia, and Europe to achieve that milestone. Also, India is the first country in the world to get this success in its first attempt. 2014, World Health Organization gave India the certificate for being a total polio-free country. Being the second most populous country with 1.3 billion people, this was indeed a remarkable achievement in India's healthcare sector. 2017, ISRO made another world record. With the help of one PSLV rocket, they sent 104 satellites at a time to space and placed them precisely in their individual orbits. Earlier, such a record was made by Russia, who had sent 37 satellites at a time. If we look back, we will see that after 75 years of independence, India has been steadily progressing towards overall development and self-reliance. In terms of all parameters of development like education, healthcare, economy, agriculture, heavy industry, science and technology, India has already made a strong and admirable position in the world. Today's young generation is agile, innovative, tech-savvy and striving towards making the new India. In our hearts, India shall always be Sare Jahan Se Acha. We bow down our heads to salute those millions of brave hearts who had deshackled our country from the 200 years of British rule, brought so much development and prosperity for the countrymen, and made that hugely impossible task possible. Jai Hind.